The wine glass slid across the white tablecloth, stopping inches from my trembling hand. Chase Donovan's voice cut through the restaurant's quiet hum like ice. "I can't be with someone so." Broke. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and cruel. My cheeks burned as nearby diners turned to stare. My stomach twisted into knots. 3 years together, and this was how it ended. In a crowded restaurant on a Friday night, with strangers watching my humiliation unfold. Chase stood up, straightening his expensive suit jacket. He dropped cash on the table to cover my drink and walked out without looking back. The click of his shoes against the marble floor echoed in my ears. My name is Madison Reed, and that night, my whole world crumbled. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to move. The waiter approached cautiously, probably wondering if I was going to cry or make a scene. I did neither. My hands gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Around me, whispers floated through the restaurant. People pretended not to stare while their eyes burned into my skin. My chest felt tight. My throat burned with unshed tears, but I refused to fall apart in public. Not here. Not now. Not for him. I stood slowly, grabbed my purse, and walked out with my head high. Outside, the cold night air hit my face like a slap. Only then did I let myself breathe. The tears came fast and silent as I walked to my car alone. Driving home, memories flooded my mind. I remembered the first time we met at a hospital fundraiser 2 years ago. Chase had seemed different then, charming, genuine, and interested in my work as a nurse. He'd asked about my patients, laughed at my stories, and made me feel seen. I fell hard and fast. My mother had warned me. "He comes from money, Madison. People like that don't understand people like us." I dismissed her concerns, convinced love could bridge any gap. Now, sitting at a red light with tears streaming down my face, her words echoed in my head. I'd been so blind, so foolishly hopeful. Love hadn't bridged anything. It had just delayed the inevitable rejection. The memories of his family dinners made my stomach churn. His mother's tight smile when I arrived in my modest car. His father's questions about my career trajectory sounded more like interrogations. The way they'd exchange glances when I talked about my work at the public hospital. "She's sweet," his mother once said, "but not quite the right type for our Chase." I'd smiled through their condescension, pretending their words didn't sting. I'd convinced myself that Chase was different from them. That he saw beyond wealth and status. Tonight proved how wrong I'd been. He was exactly like them. Maybe worse, because he'd pretended otherwise for so long. The betrayal cut deeper because I'd trusted him. 5. Back in my small apartment, I stood in front of the mirror. The red dress I'd worn felt wrong now. Too hopeful, too naive. Tears streaked my makeup, but beneath the pain, something else stirred. Anger, cold, sharp, and clarifying. Chase thought he'd won. He discarded me like I was nothing, like 3 years meant nothing because I didn't have money. He'd humiliated me publicly, confident I'd slink away in shame. But as I stared at my reflection, a different woman looked back at me. One who was done being underestimated. One who was ready to prove everyone wrong. If Chase wanted to see what broke really meant, I'd show him. I'd build something so big he'd choke on his own arrogance. I pulled out the old notebook from my desk drawer. Inside were pages of ideas I'd been developing for years. A healthcare startup focused on affordable medical supplies for underprivileged clinics. I'd shelved the dream when Chase started complaining about how much time I spent working. Now, alone in my apartment with nothing left to lose, I opened the notebook again. Each page represented hours of research, contacts I'd made, and problems I'd identified in the healthcare system. The foundation was already there. I just needed to commit fully. "Time to turn heartbreak into power," I whispered to myself. My fingers traced over the business plan I'd written months ago. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my worth. The first weeks were brutal. I spent every spare moment after my nursing shifts researching investors, refining my business plan, and reaching out to contacts. Rejection letters piled up. Emails went unanswered. Phone calls led nowhere. Each no stung, but I refused to quit. I'd faced worse than business rejection. At least these people were honest about not wanting me. They didn't pretend for 3 years first. I worked through exhaustion, through doubt, through moments when I wanted to give up. My apartment became a war room covered in notes and printouts. My friends barely saw me. My mother worried about my health, but I couldn't stop. Every time I felt like quitting, I remembered Chase's smug face sliding that wine glass across the table. Then finally, a breakthrough. A local investor named Mrs. Patricia Holmes called me back. She'd reviewed my proposal 3 times, she said. She was impressed by my numbers, my vision, and my understanding of the healthcare industry's problems. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She asked tough questions about scalability, about competition, about my commitment. I answered every single one without hesitation. By the end of our meeting, she smiled. "I'm in," she said simply. "I believe in what you're building." My heart raced as we shook hands. This was real. My first major investor, my first real validation. Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the naive kind I'd had with Chase. This was different. Earned. News traveled fast in our social circle. I heard through mutual friends that Chase was throwing a successful people-only party the following week. The phrase made me laugh out loud. Successful people only. As if success could be measured by bank accounts and family names. As if nurses saving lives weren't successful. As if building something from nothing didn't count. I almost wanted to show up at his party. Walk in wearing confidence instead of that red dress. Show him I was still standing. Still building. Still here. But I had better things to do than stroke his ego. Let him have his exclusive party. I had a company to launch. And unlike his inherited wealth, mine would be earned. I started attending charity events and industry conferences. Each handshake was strategic. Each conversation was a chess move. I learned quickly that the business world respected confidence and competence more than pedigree. My nursing background gave me credibility when discussing healthcare solutions. My genuine passion for helping underserved communities resonated with people. Board members listened. Investors took my calls. Slowly, methodically, I built a network. I learned who held real power in the industry. I studied their priorities, their pain points, and their goals. Every detail mattered. Every connection counted. Chase had dismissed me for lacking wealth. He'd never understood that wealth could be created. That power could be earned. His mistake. My advantage. I smiled at every event, shook every hand, and quietly positioned myself exactly where I needed to be. My cousin texted me one evening with gossip. "Chase is telling everyone you were too clingy, says he dodged a bullet. Lol." I stared at the message, feeling nothing. No anger, no hurt, just mild amusement. Let him spin whatever story he needed to protect his ego. Let him tell his wealthy friends that he was the victim. The truth would reveal itself soon enough. I didn't need to defend myself or correct his lies. My success would do that for me. I typed back a simple response. Good for him. Then I returned to my laptop, to the investor presentation I was perfecting, to the real work that mattered. Chase was living in the past, rewriting our story to make himself look better. I was building the future. 3 months after our breakup, my startup secured its first major contract. A network of community clinics in underserved neighborhoods agreed to pilot our supply program. The announcement was small, just a press release and some social media posts. But the clinic directors posted photos of their new equipment, thanking us publicly for making quality healthcare accessible. I watched those posts with quiet satisfaction. This was my revenge, not dramatic or petty. Just undeniable proof that I was building something meaningful, something that mattered more than expensive restaurants and exclusive parties. I saved the screenshots, not out of spite, but as reminders. On hard days, I'd look at those grateful faces and remember why I started this journey. Chase had broken my heart, but he'd also freed me to chase something bigger. Then came the unexpected news. A mutual friend, someone who still talked to both Chase and me, sent a warning text. "Chase's company is struggling. They're looking for investors desperately. Be careful." I read the message twice, letting the information settle. Chase worked for his father's luxury real estate firm. They'd always seemed untouchable, wealthy, secure. Now they were struggling. The timing felt almost too perfect. I'd been building my company for months, gaining traction and credibility. And Chase's world was crumbling. I didn't celebrate. I just filed the information away. Timing, patience, and precision. Those were my tools now. Revenge, if it came, would be a side effect of my success, not the goal. But I'd be lying if I said the coincidence didn't feel like justice. The invitation arrived in my email inbox. A major healthcare industry gala, the kind where deals were made and partnerships were formed. The guest list read like a who's who of medical industry leaders. And there, buried in the list of attendees, was Chase Donovan representing his father's firm. My chest tightened, not with fear but with anticipation. This was it. The chessboard was finally set. I'd spent months preparing, networking, and building credibility. Now I'd step onto his turf, into his world, and show him exactly what broke had become. I responded to the invitation immediately, confirming my attendance. Then I called my stylist. For this night, I needed to look like the force I'd become, powerful, confident, untouchable. The woman Chase had dismissed was gone. Someone stronger had taken her place. I arrived at the gala in a sleek black dress that whispered power instead of shouting it. My hair was pulled back in a smooth chignon. Diamond earrings borrowed from Mrs. Holmes glinted in my ears. I walked into the ballroom with my head high, scanning the room with practiced ease. And then I saw him. Chase stood near the bar, surrounded by colleagues, laughing at something one of them said. He looked the same. Same expensive suit, same confident posture, same casual arrogance. Then he glanced up and saw me. His face froze. The laughter died on his lips. For a moment, we locked eyes across the crowded room. I saw confusion flicker across his features, then recognition, then something else, uncertainty. I smiled calmly, the kind of smile that gave nothing away, and walked past him toward a group of board members I'd been cultivating relationships with for months. I spent the next hour mingling strategically. Every conversation was purposeful. I discussed my company's vision with healthcare executives. I shared success stories from our pilot program with potential investors. I listened more than I spoke, learning what people needed, what problems kept them awake at night. Several times, I felt Chase's eyes on me from across the room. He watched me shake hands with people he'd been trying to impress for years. Watched me laugh with board members who barely acknowledged him. Finally, he tried to approach me privately, away from the crowd. "Madison," he said, his voice uncertain. "Can we talk?" I glanced at my watch. "I have a meeting with some board members in 5 minutes, perhaps another time." His jaw tightened. The tables had turned completely, and he was starting to realize it. The meeting with the investors was everything I'd worked toward. 5 board members from the region's largest healthcare consortium sat around the table, listening to my pitch. I presented confidently, backing every claim with data, every vision with actionable plans. I showed them our pilot program results, the testimonials from clinic directors, and the scalability model we'd developed. They asked tough questions. I answered each one without hesitation. By the end, they were nodding, exchanging meaningful glances and making notes. The lead investor, a woman named Dr. Helena Price, smiled at me. "This is impressive work, Madison, really impressive." Then she asked the question that changed everything. "How soon can we discuss a partnership?" My heart soared, but my face remained calm. "I'm available at your convenience." Through the glass conference room wall, I saw Chase hovering nearby, watching. His face had gone pale. News of my partnership with the healthcare consortium spread through the gala within an hour. People who'd barely acknowledged me earlier suddenly wanted to talk. Business cards appeared. Congratulations flowed. I accepted each one graciously, professionally, never gloating. But I watched Chase's reaction from across the room. He stood with his colleagues, trying to maintain composure as whispers reached his ears. His company had been courting the same consortium for months, begging for investment or partnership. They'd been rejected repeatedly. Now they were partnering with me, with the woman he'd called too broke to date. I didn't approach him, didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The situation spoke louder than any words I could offer. Justice. I realized, didn't always require confrontation. Sometimes it just required excellence. Later that evening, Chase made one more attempt to control the narrative. I was talking with a potential client when Chase approached, all false confidence and forced charm. "Madison," he said loudly enough for others to hear. "Good to see you doing well with your little project." The dismissive tone was deliberate. Little project was meant to minimize my achievement. I turned to face him, my expression calm. "Actually, Chase, it's a multi-million-dollar healthcare initiative backed by the regional consortium. We're projected to serve over 50,000 patients in the first year." I delivered the facts without emotion, just a simple truth. The potential client's eyes widened. 50,000, that's remarkable." Chase's smile faltered. Around us, people stopped to listen. His attempt to diminish me had backfired spectacularly. "I should get back to my meeting," I said politely, turning away. Behind me, I heard whispers starting. The embarrassment was his own making. As the night continued, I noticed familiar faces from Chase's social circle watching me with new interest. People who'd attended his family's dinners, who'd participated in those subtle judgments about my background. Now they whispered to each other, pointing discreetly in my direction. I caught fragments of conversation. Is that really her? The nurse he was dating. She's the one who secured that consortium deal. Their shock was almost amusing. They'd written me off as unsuitable for their world. Now I was succeeding in ways they respected. Money and success, the only languages they truly understood. I didn't seek out their validation or approval, but watching them reevaluate their assumptions felt like vindication. Chase stood alone near the bar now, watching his former friends and family connections gravitate toward me. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone in the room could see it. Over the following weeks, I focused on building my company. The consortium partnership opened doors I'd only dreamed of. More clinics joined our program. More investors reached out. I hired a small team of dedicated people who shared my vision. We worked long hours, but the work felt meaningful. Every clinic we helped, every patient who gained access to better care, every employee I mentored reinforced that I'd made the right choice. Chase's rejection had hurt. But it had also freed me to pursue something bigger than romance or social acceptance. My mother visited my new office, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. That moment meant more than any gala, any partnership, any amount of money. This success was real, it was earned, and it was mine. 6 months after that first gala, I was invited to speak at a major charity event. The same charity where Chase and I had first met. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I prepared my speech, I thought about everything that had changed. I wasn't bitter anymore. The anger that had fueled my early days had transformed into something else. Purpose, direction, gratitude, even. Chase's rejection had been the catalyst I needed. On the night of the charity event, I arrived early. Chase was there, of course, representing his struggling company. He stood in the corner with his father, both of them looking tense. Their firm was still floundering, still desperate for the partnerships that kept eluding them. When Chase saw me, he approached hesitantly. "Congratulations on everything," he said stiffly. I nodded. "Thank you." There was nothing else to say. We were strangers now. The moment came when I was introduced as the evening's keynote speaker. I walked onto the stage to genuine applause, looking out at hundreds of faces. Some I recognized, many I didn't. Chase stood near the back, arms crossed, watching. I began my speech with the truth. "A year ago, someone told me I wasn't good enough, that I was too broke, too ordinary, too small for their world." Murmurs rippled through the audience. That rejection could have destroyed me. Instead, it pushed me to build something meaningful, something that helps thousands of people access the healthcare they deserve. I talked about the journey, the struggles, and the small victories that led to bigger ones. I talked about dignity, perseverance, and finding power in purpose rather than validation. The audience hung on every word. By the end, they were on their feet, applauding. Chase remained standing in the back, his face unreadable. After the speech, Dr. Helena Price from the consortium approached me with someone new. "Madison, I'd like you to meet Timothy Brooks, CEO of Premier Healthcare Solutions." My heart skipped. Premier was one of the largest healthcare companies in the country. "I've been following your work," Timothy said, shaking my hand. "We'd like to discuss a major expansion partnership." Behind him, I saw Chase watching. He'd been trying to land a meeting with the Premier for over a year. His company desperately needed their backing. Now they were offering me a partnership instead. Chase's face drained of all color as the reality hit him. Everything he'd lost by dismissing me. Everything I'd gained by refusing to stay dismissed. Timothy continued talking about possibilities and meetings, but I barely heard him. I was watching Chase finally understand. The woman he'd called too broke was now the woman his company needed. Poetic justice. 3 months later, I stood in my expanded office overlooking the city. My company had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We have served over 100 clinics now, employed 50 people, and had partnerships with major healthcare organizations. I'd been featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences, and recognized as an emerging leader in healthcare innovation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry." I stared at the message, knowing it was from Chase. After everything, he finally apologized. I deleted the message without responding. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. I didn't need his apology or validation. I'd proven to myself that rejection wasn't the end. It was a redirection. Chase had rejected me for being too broke. My next move hadn't just left him speechless. It had left him irrelevant. And that was the sweetest victory of all.